Hi, this is Miss Wright, and I am going to go over some more literary terms for the Odyssey. You can find these literary terms on Quizlet.com, or you can study them right on YouTube. Alliteration. Some I'll go quickly through because I know we've done them several times before, and some I'll dwell a little bit longer. The repetition of consonant sounds. So we know that we found these numerous times as we read. The repeated P sound at the beginning of the word is a consonant sound. Anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism. When the gods act like humans, they show very human characteristics such as jealousy, anger, envy, and also it can be when they appear in human form. Can be another example of anthropomorphism. Archetype is a noun. Archetypal is the adjective. Okay, so the original pattern or model from which all things of the same kind are copied or on which they are based. So Superman is a modern day hero, but he really comes from the archetype that goes back thousands of years to Greek mythology, maybe even further back, where you have this man who possesses great power, great strength, and great virtue. If you think of, you could think of Odysseus, you could also think of Perseus and Theseus having great abilities, or Hercules having great abilities. Arte, excellence in any sphere of life. So you don't just have to be a king or an upper class person to have arte. You can be at any station in life, the low, the middle, the high. You can be male, you can be female, you can be human, you can be an animal such as a dog. We're going to meet a dog late in the story who is an example of arte. So just to be excellent at whatever level of society you are. So you can be an excellent maid, you can be an excellent farmer, you can be an excellent king, an excellent son, an excellent father. So as long as you have an aspect of excellence in you, you have arte. Conditional statement is an if then statement, describes something that will be done or will happen only if and when another thing happens. So if you do this, then I will do that. Dramatic irony. Dramatic irony occurs, says in literature, a plot device in which the audience's or reader's knowledge of events or individuals surpasses that of the characters. And basically here, this person is trying to escape from jail. He's dug a tunnel. But what he doesn't know, as soon as he breaks through this wall, he's going to end up in a sewage tank. This is a sewage tank because that's an outhouse. So we, looking at the picture, experience dramatic irony because we know that he's not going to be happy when he breaks through this wall, and it becomes humorous, but he doesn't know. So we know more than the man knows in that picture. And it can add to suspense, it can add to humor, it can add to a number of qualities that exist in the story. Duss Ex Machina. Literally, I'm going to explain this. This is supposed to be a play, and in ancient times, if they had a god that they wanted to intervene, which is going to happen at the end of the Odyssey, the unabridged version, you would have the way to announce this person as a god is that you would actually lower them down on a pulley, and it's a way of ending the story when there's no other ending to be had. So it's a plot device that allows this is like ancient special effects, basically ancient special effects. So it says, noun, in ancient Greek and Roman drama, a god introduced into a play to resolve the entanglements of the plot. Any artificial or improbable probable device resolving the difficulties of a plot. This device usually occurs near the end of the narrative, and that is what is going to happen in our story in the unabridged. I'll bring in that for you to see. Epic simile. Epic simile is basically an extended simile. So we know a simile is a comparison of two very different things, but an epic simile is an extended, detailed comparison of two different things. It's also known as a Homeric simile when it's used by Homer in the Odyssey or the Iliad. So a Homeric simile and an epic simile are the same thing, long comparisons, but when it's specifically used by the poet Homer, they're called Homeric similes. Epithet, an adjective or adjective phrase closely associated with a noun in the poem. So instead of saying Athena, you would see gray-eyed Athena. Instead of saying Zeus, you would say Zeus, Lord of the clouds, or Zeus of the thunderbolt, or it's not the sea, it's the wine dark sea. So, and those descriptions, you'll know it's an epithet because those descriptions repeat throughout the story. They're part of the formula of the story and they keep coming back. So that is how you'll know you have run into an epithet. Foil. Foil, a character who serves as a contrast for another character. Each character is intensified by the other's presence. Opposite characters are set side by side to add tension to a scene. So here's Batman, and his foil is the Joker. Here is Harry Potter. This is his foil. Here is Snow White, and the witch, the evil witch, is her foil. So these opposite characters we know because they are so different that they're going to have a conflict. There's going to be some kind of conflict. Foreshadowing, hints or clues that the author uses to help the reader anticipate what will happen in the future. Formula, a ready-made phrase varying in length from a word or two to several lines, already adapted to the meter and capable of being adapted instantaneously to a poet's subject matter. So instead of me reading this whole thing, basically about 20% of the Odyssey is repetition. And it's important to have repetition because this is 24 books of poetry, thousands of lines of poetry, and in order for the blind poet to remember everything, he needs to have repetition in order to cut down on some of the detail. So instead of coming up with a new description for Athena every time, he'll say the gray-eyed goddess, and eventually he won't even say Athena the gray-eyed goddess. He'll just say the gray-eyed goddess, and we know after a while who they are, and we are used to the lines. Also, once the construct of the meter is accomplished, by repeating the line, you don't have to figure out, does this fit the meter? Once you figure it out, you can just keep reusing it throughout the poem because you know it's going to fit the meter, the rhythm of the lines. Hubris. This is an important concept that we'll be talking about. Having an overwhelming pride, a pride that destroys or causes damage. So, unfortunately, one of the things that Odysseus will do later on in the story is to show hubris. And so, when it occurs, you'll notice it, or make sure you notice it, and make sure you mark it down in your text as an example of hubris. I don't want to do a spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is. Imagery. We know that imagery has to do with sight, smell, taste, sound, and touch. So Homer uses a lot of imagery. He uses a lot of imagery from the natural world because this is way before the age of technology. So he's using the imagery of the landscape around him, the seascape around him, and very, very beautiful images from the natural world. They're very compelling, so pay attention to those as you are reading. In Medras Res means in the middle of things. I thought this was kind of cute. So here's the beginning of the story, here's the middle of the story, here's the end. Instead of starting the Odyssey at the beginning, we are actually closer to the end. We're probably around here. And then as Odysseus tells someone his adventures, he flashes back to the beginning and then we come forward. So it says, Latin, it's Latin, the epic convention or tradition of beginning in the middle of things rather than at the very start of the story. And I'm going to ask you why. Something to think about is why would an author start here as opposed to here? How does it enhance the story to start away from the beginning of the story? Okay, you can read the rest on your own. Invocation. Invocation. Calling upon a god or goddess for assistance. So this is a Native American woman, but she is invoking her ancestors or her gods. She is supplicating, she is asking them for something that she desires. Metamorphosis. We know metamorphosis from science, right? So we have an egg, turns into a larva, turns into a pupa, and eventually turns into a beautiful monarch butterfly. And in our story, it's whenever you see a character change into something completely different. So when Zeus turns into a swan, that's an example of metamorphosis. Uh, and there's other examples. I don't want to give them all away. When Athena turns into um, a bird and flies away, that's an example of metamorphosis. A complete change of form, structure, or substance as transformation by magic, witchcraft, a transformation caused by supposed supernatural powers. Metaphor, direct comparison of two very different things, not using like or as. So there's no like or as in it, and it's a comparison of two very different things. Motif, a motif is a repeated pattern, and in wallpaper, it's easy to see the motif. Here you can see this flower and this little flower, and then here the little flower, and it would go all the way around the room. That's a motif. In literature, when some critical element of the story keeps coming back from chapter to chapter to chapter, then we say this is a motif. The motif can be grief, the motif can be death, the motif can be any number of things that keep repeating throughout the story. Pathos. Pathos. Pathos, the emotional part of the story that causes emotional response, the quality of something that makes people feel pity or sadness. Now, pathos isn't what's on the page. Pathos is what happens to you when you read what's on the page. So when the characters are going through something and it makes you either feel very happy, very sad, very excited, very scared, what's happening to you emotionally is the pathos. It's not what's on the page. So it's an author's way of manipulating his or her audience. Very strong rhetorical device. Personification. Personification. Giving human characteristics to something that is not human. So this is supposed to be a dog, but he's dressed up as a person. I don't know exactly what's going on here, but giving human characteristics to something that is not human. We've had that term many times before. Plot complication. This story has many, many characters in it, and because of that, we also have some plot complications. So it's a conflict or event in the story that causes a problem for the main character. Odysseus' goal is to get home, and every time he is thwarted, every time he is prevented from getting home and reaching his goal, that's a plot complication. And this is Freytag's pyramid, which shows us the traditional arc of a story. We have the exposition, the rising action, the conflict, the climax, which would be the highest point, the falling action, and the resolution. And you can think about these elements as you read the Odyssey. Rhetorical question. Very easy.